Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final session of this advanced training class. I want to thank you for participating in this so faithfully over the last, but today is the 7th week. So thank you very, very much. This is Mike Riches hosting the webinar here as usual, and very, very excited to close out our webinar today in a big way. We've got some great information that I want to cover. Just as a note, I emailed out last week the link to go and view the past sessions. I've got all 6 sessions that we've had so far up on that link. Of course, I'll be posting today's as well. And so if you've missed a session, just go find that email and you can just click on that link. It'll take you to our YouTube page where we've hosted those trainings, and you can catch up on any of those that you may have missed. And frankly, some of those would be worth going and watching again, even if you were on live. I'm thinking about specifically when we had like Bill Stovall and Rachel Lawton that did their sample presentations. Those were fantastic and definitely good resources that you could go check out again. But thank you again for being on here. Thank you for participating. Thank you to all of you who have been entering your data. I've started to connect with people on that and go over that. If I've not connected with you and you would like that to happen, definitely feel free to reach out to me. You can shoot me an email and just say, hey, I'd love to connect with you, and I'll set that up. I've been doing that proactively, but I haven't been able to get to everyone yet. So if you shoot me an email, that'll let me know that you're serious and that you would like to look at that data together. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would love to I'd love to use that and go through and just look at that data with you, be able to identify strengths and weaknesses. If you know your strengths, you can play to your strengths. You can use your strengths to your advantages. If you know your weaknesses, you can work on those. You can correct things that, again, usually are pretty small tweaks, but over time can make a difference. Hopefully all of you were on the call that we had this morning with Chris Evans. I thought that was a fantastic call. I would highly recommend, if for any reason you missed that call, to go back and listen to it. I thought it was just really, really fantastic. On our team website, we've been updating quite a few things on that as well. New videos or updated videos are in the employee benefits section that you can go check out. Of course, if you have any questions on any of those, please feel free to let me know that as well. Our topic of conversation today, we're going to kind of circle back and go through some of what we've covered and review a little bit about what we covered, but then I want to share some thoughts with you on earning a 6-figure income within the world of LegalShield Business Solutions. And especially as a member of this organization, what resources do you have to enable you to be able to do that? Just again, to review our system here, and I should mention, we do have the privilege of listening to another sample presentation here this morning, and we're actually going to go to that here shortly. We've got Tracy Wright-Owen, who's going to do a sample enrollment presentation, and we'll go through as we did last week. And we had Mr. Reese Frencha and Mr. Mike Scott that were both willing to stand up and say, hey, look, critique me and tear this thing apart so we can rebuild it. Of course, both did a fantastic job last week, and I really appreciate when someone's willing to do that, especially in front of a group of their peers. That's one of the most difficult presentations that you'll ever do, is in front of a group of people that know what you should be saying and what the coverage is really all about. I've always thought that when you get in front of a group of employees and you're speaking especially in front of a new group, you can say something wrong or leave something out, and they don't know any better. It's not like they're sitting there critiquing you. I'm not saying that those presentations are necessarily easy, but I've always thought the most difficult presentations are in front of your peers, and I really appreciate Tracy and Mike and Doris being willing to do that. We do that for a purpose. I mean, I hope that the stuff that we share with those individuals is helpful for them. In fact, I hope it's helpful for everyone to be able to hear tips and critiques that can help us improve our own presentations. But one big reason why we do that as part of this advanced training is I want you to be familiar with that process of critiquing. I want you to hear how little changes, I mean, well, I'm talking pretty minor changes, how they can really make a pretty big difference. You know, as I think about uh, Mike Scott's, for example, I just grabbed the notes from his presentation last week, and one of those things was I liked how he used the word paralyzed. He was talking about a victim of identity theft feels paralyzed. Well, I'm fairly certain that no one in Mike's presentation is going to walk up afterwards and say, Mike, you know what, I was not going to sign up for this, but since you used the word paralyzed, I'm going to sign up for it. One little change like that is not going to make a monumental difference in the overall results. But those little changes added together, they do make a difference. And all of a sudden, they allow him to connect emotionally with people that he would not have connected with otherwise. They allow him to relay a message in a clear way that would not be relayed otherwise. And we've got great scripting for that. If you look in the back office, we've got our employee benefits, our enrollment sample script. That's a great script to start from and to go over. And so I hope that you're using that. Not that the goal is to have everyone memorize something and then go out and be a robot. I mean, at the end of the day, we all have to find our own voice. But again, the script contains some of that really good language, and I hope that you're seeing through this process of critiquing that there is a difference in the things that we say, even the smallest things, that those can add up and really start to make a big difference. And I hope you're noticing how specific we want to be in the process of doing that. So we'll listen to Tracy here shortly. Just again, as a review, we've talked about getting qualified leads. We spent some time on that several weeks ago. It was in week 2 that we talked about getting qualified leads, using your warm market for that, supplementing that with some cold market leads, but having a substantial list of people. And I think I asked you, if I remember correctly, to come up with 30. I think that's what I said. Maybe it was 50, but I think I asked you to come up with 30. I hope that since week 2, you have doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled that initial list. If you're still working off a list of 30, you're missing the point here. Now, I want to be careful because there might be someone that's part-time that is working that list of 30, and maybe it's a warm market list, and they're having a lot of results on that, so they've not expanded that. There may be an exception to that, but the reality is the vast majority of us, I hope that we've continued to expand that list. And I hope that your initial pipeline is bigger than those original 30 that I asked you to put on there. That ought to be 50, 100, maybe even 150 companies now that you've worked in to that initial pipeline. That same day that we talked about making a list, we talked about prospecting that list. And I went over a lot of tips. That was all back in week 2. I went over a lot of tips in prospecting, the kind of posture that you want to have on the phone when you're calling, or that you want to have in person when you're going in. And that posture is so crucial. The approach is important. The fact that you're doing it is really the key, though. And I've always said you can make up an activity what you lack in skill. So we're all still working on that skill set. We're all still developing it. I mean, if someone right now is making 100 calls to yield one appointment, they want to work on that, and they want to get to where they can make an appointment every 75 calls and eventually every 50 calls. Even someone that's at 1 out of 50 right now, and I'm giving you cold market numbers. Warm market would be a lot better than this, but even someone that's at 1 out of 50, hopefully they're looking at that saying, man, I'd like to get that to 1 out of 45 or 1 out of 40. I hope that we're always trying to grow and get better. If you're at 100%, if every call that you make yields an appointment, then maybe there's no room for improvement for you. But I don't know of anybody that's at 100%. I'm looking at the numbers that we're reporting. Nobody's at 100%, not with volume. So I hope that we're always looking at that and getting better. But again, I go back to you can make up in activity what you lack in skill, meaning that if my numbers right now are I need to make 100 calls to yield one appointment, the most important question is not how can I get better or how can I improve. Those are important questions, but the most important question is how quickly can I make 100 calls? How fast can I make my next 100 calls to get my next appointment? And that won't always be linear. I mean, it won't always be, you make 100 calls and you get an appointment. Sometimes you'll make 100 calls and you'll get 3 appointments. And then you might make 150 calls and get none. So it won't always be linear, but that's why we've collected data now over several weeks. That's how you really kind of find out what those ratios are. And the numbers are the numbers. We could improve those numbers, but at the end of the day, I go back to what Jim Rohn said. I love that quote by Jim Rohn. If your number is 9 out of 10 and mine is 1 out of 10, I'll beat you every time. Because you'll make 10 calls and get 9, and I'll make 100 calls and get 10. And so you can make up in activity what you lack in skill. And I've been really impressed with some of you, how you've done that. How you've, number one, not been afraid of massive activity. But number two, some of you have adjusted your activity goal because of your ratio. So maybe you put in that initial game plan that we made, the action plan that we made back in week 1, maybe your goal was to make 40 calls a day. And as you got into the numbers, you've realized, you know what, I'm going to need to make 70 calls a day if I really want to meet these goals. And remember that quote from Confucius, when it becomes clear that the activity is not going to, I'm paraphrasing him here, that the activity is not going to meet the goal, don't adjust the goal, adjust the activity. And so I hope that we're continuing to prospect. I've said it throughout this entire training, and I'll say it once again today, we are in the most crucial prospecting season. We've been in that throughout this entire training, August and September, and even early October. We are in the most crucial prospecting season of the year. You won't hear me say that in January, although it's important to prospect in January. You won't hear me say that in April, although it's important to prospect in April. You won't hear me say that any other time except for right now. As we prepare to launch into the fourth quarter, this is by far the most crucial prospecting time of the year. And so take advantage of it. Double down on your efforts right now. And when it gets to harvest time, you'll be glad that you did. We then spent some time on that DM meeting and talked about a lot of different tips in that DM meeting, what kind of tools you want to use in that DM meeting, et cetera, et cetera. We spent time on the enrollment, and we've been listening to some sample presentations for both the DM meeting and the enrollment last week, and then again we'll hear from Tracy here shortly. I have not spent a whole lot of time in retention and servicing groups, and it's not that that's not an important topic. It is an important topic. But the whole idea there, it is different than the other 4 steps. The other 4 steps kind of flow one into another. And I guess that's true for step number 5, because the idea is that we're opening groups and then we want to turn around. We want to be able to service those groups. We just edited the video in our back office on step 5, retention. I would encourage you to go back and listen to that video again. It's a great video. We share a lot of great content about servicing, and again, this is kind of the redheaded stepchild of that probably is not a sensitive way to say that. This is the kind of outlier of these 5 steps, is that 5th step, retention. It's the one that does not get a whole lot of attention because we're so focused on prospecting and saying the right thing to write new business. But the reality is every group that you open becomes an asset. What is an asset? An asset is something that throws off money. So if you owned a rental home and you had renters in it, that becomes an asset. If you own a rental home and you don't have renters, then that's a liability. But if you have renters in your rental home and they're paying every month, then that's an asset. That's something that you own that throws off money. Groups really are assets. Memberships can become assets. Although you could argue in the first year, while you're earning, if you've taken an advance, those memberships are not an asset yet. But certainly after that 13th month, when you start to accrue residual income, that becomes an asset as well. Certainly people in your organization, people that you recruit in your team, can become great assets for you. Well, every group is an asset as well. And I mentioned earlier, we spend so much time talking about writing new business. Well, the reality is you can write a lot of new business in your existing groups. We've been doing that a lot this year. There's a lot of people that have been going back into groups. They've been talking about, the identity theft migration. They've been sharing some of the new features of the LegalShield product. I've learned this, 2 important keys in servicing your groups. Number one, set the expectation early. So tell the HR people, the decision makers that you're working with, let them know immediately after that first enrollment that you're going to need to reservice the group, and figure out a good time for them, whether that's every 6 months, every 9 months, or every 12 months. I like what Marty Galano teaches there. He sets an open enrollment cycle with his groups. That might not be on their traditional open enrollment cycle, but he sets a renewal cycle up. And that's a better way of saying that, a renewal cycle. So that at this time every year, we're going to come back in, I'm going to do another presentation, we need to get everybody back together. Just setting that expectation is important. If you have the expectation but you don't effectively communicate that to the decision makers of your group, what you're going to find is you show up and you want to meet with their employees again, and they're not going to have it. Another important key there is don't just show up a year later expecting to write business. We've got to maintain these relationships. So that's one thing that video does a really good job of talking about, is maintaining these relationships throughout that cycle. You can't disappear for 11 and a half months and then expect to come back in and write more business 12 months from now. You've got to stay in contact with them. Now, that can be something as simple as an email every couple months, just touching base, making sure everything is going okay. That can be something as simple as stopping by once or twice in that first year, and maybe at least once every year afterwards to bring by a gift. The holiday season is a great time to do that, to bring gifts to your active accounts. Now, if you do it right before Christmas, you're going to be one of 50 other people that bring them a gift, and it's not going to be very memorable unless you bring them a really, really nice gift. But I've learned, and this was a tip from Rob Vest that I picked up years ago, he likes to do his gifting before Thanksgiving. And usually he's the first person to bring him a gift as we get into that holiday season. And it has nothing to do with not liking Christmas. I love Christmas. I think it's a great season. That particular season is my favorite time of the year, in fact. But it just has to do with trying to set yourself apart from the masses. And they're going to get a lot of different little gifts during the month of December. But he does it in November, and because he's the first, it tends to stick out a little bit more. So keep that in mind. And make sure that we're remaining in contact, that we're keeping an open line of communication. That's also important for retention, not just to get back in and be able to service the group later, but for retention as well. You want them to feel confident that if one of their employees has an issue, they can call you about it. That's crucial, because the last thing you want the employee doing is just canceling their membership and then talking negatively around the office about how that didn't work the way that they wanted it to. And that could be something as simple as they called the law firm and the law firm told them something that they didn't want to hear, which is usually what it is. If something like that happens, you want the decision maker to feel confident saying, hey, no, call our rep. You need to talk to them. Or maybe they reach out to you on behalf of that employee, and you want to be able to be involved. Now, I've been doing this for 17 years. I don't get a ton of those calls. But when I do get those calls, I want to be responsive there. I really want to be responsive and show them that I'm serious about taking care of their group. The other thought that I'll just share with you as far as servicing groups is HR people like something new. Now, your presentation to the employees does not have to change. But when I say HR people, I'm talking about decision makers in general. Your presentation to the employees doesn't necessarily have to change. But when you go back in and you're coming up on that renewal cycle, let them know we've got new stuff that we want to talk about. Whatever that is for you, if that's maybe focusing a little bit more on the members' perks, or, LegalShield has been great these last few years because they're always introducing new stuff. So you can pull out new features of the identity theft plan. And the way that works is when I go back into a decision maker, I'm going to talk about, hey, we've got some incredible new stuff that I want to be able to share with your employees. And that's what gets them to say, okay, great, let's do another meeting. It helps them say that. Now, setting the expectation early on is important, but you can say that. You can set that expectation today after your initial enrollment. That doesn't mean that they'll necessarily remember that a year from now. So having something new is always important. People like new stuff. So I'll say, hey, we got some new stuff. I want to be able to share this with your employees. Now, again, my employee presentation is going to be 98% the same because I've got new employees in there. That's why it's such an opportunity to write new business. I've got, the company might have 5 or 6 people that started working there this year that I'm going to be able to get this in front of. I want to be in front of as many employees as possible, though, because there were people that did not sign up the first year that they'll sign up the second year or the third year or the fourth year. So servicing groups is always a great way to write new business, as well as reaffirm to the existing book of business why they bought this plan. And you want to remember that when a decision maker says, well, why don't I just get the new people in here? It really is important that you be able to present to everyone again. Because if they bought it the first year, you want to remind them why they bought it, and so they keep it. If they didn't buy it the first year, but they heard you, they might have something that's changed in their life that they're not necessarily thinking about, that if they hear you again this year, they will buy again. And some of them just didn't pull the trigger last time, and they'll be ready this year. That's why I love going back into reservice an account. I love going back in when someone that was there the first year, and now it's year 2, and they come up and say, can I take this home and think about it? I say, yeah, you did that last year. You had a whole year to think about it. Let's get you started. And I kind of say that with a smile, but it's so true. Don't let them make the same mistake the second year, and many won't. Many will, that chose not to enroll the first year, they will enroll that second year or third year or fourth year. And then, of course, the new people that have that hired on to that particular company, we want to get in front of them as well. So it's just like the first year. When you're servicing year 2, year 3, year 4, you want to be in front of as many employees as possible. Piggybacking on a staff meeting, piggybacking on a safety meeting, those are always good ways to maximize your access. If they don't have anything like that, doing a lunch and learn again. But remember, new stuff. We've got new information that we want to share. Sometimes that could be as simple as a recent news article about identity theft that you're going to share. Again, you don't have to go in with a brand new presentation. 95, 97, 98% of it should be the same. You'll emphasize maybe some of those newer things. But the same stuff that push buttons in year 1 are going to push buttons in year 2 and year 3 and year 4. So your overall presentation should not change very much. Okay, I spent a little bit more time on that than I intended, but I do want to make sure that we understand this system that's right here on your screen right now. This is what it's all about. And the more that we'll put this system to work for us, the more money we're going to make. Okay, let me get Tracy Wright Owen on here and try to unmute you, Tracy. Okay. Okay, Tracy, do we have you on live? Or do we have you on? Yay, I can hear your voice. That's wonderful.
Yay, we're going to make it this week.
Yay, I'm glad for that. Well, thank you for being willing to do a sample presentation here. And again, I think this is a great practice of critiquing. And I appreciate your willingness to do that in front of our group. This is a sample enrollment presentation that you're going to be doing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here's our scenario. Tracy is now in front of a room full of employees. She's got the decision maker, and if you want, you can pretend like I'm the decision maker, that has allowed her to come in, and maybe she's piggybacking on a staff meeting, maybe she's doing a voluntary lunch and learn, or whatever it was that got her this access, that got her the most, got her in front of the most employees as possible. That's what she's done. Now she's in front of this group, and she's going to be presenting LegalShield and IDShield and giving them an opportunity to enroll. So with that, Tracy, thank you so much again for your willingness to share, and I'm going to mute out and let you do your thing.
Well, thank you, Mike. Good morning. My name is Tracy, your LegalShield rep. I'm excited to be here with you this morning. We have 2 new voluntary benefits that are available to you starting today. I want to thank Mrs. Fernandez for allowing me this opportunity to make these voluntary benefits possible for you: legal protection and identity theft protection. All of you should have received a packet and a pen when you came in today. On the front page is an overview with my contact information at the bottom, my phone, my email. You may contact me anytime for questions about your benefits. The next page is the enrollment form. And some of you are going to ask right away, do I have to fill this out? Do I have to return it to you? The answer is yes. Everybody has to return it to me, whether you sign up today or not. I like to start off right away with the prices up front. LegalShield is $8.98 per person. That's an entire family, 2 adults and 8 children, up to the age of 26. Does anyone in the room have more than 8 children? Great, then we can move forward. Individual is $7.59. Let's talk about what's important to you, your value system, and your budget. What I like to do is start with the legal protection. Most people do not use lawyers. Why? Well, they're too expensive. On the average, we all have 1 to 2 legal issues a year. Does that mean we're bad people? Absolutely not. I think all of you can agree bad things happen to good people. Sometimes you just need advice from someone. Could be a letter that you got in the mail saying you owed XYZ company a ton of money and you've never heard from them. You might have a dispute with your landlord over your deposit. You could get a traffic ticket. You might need advice there. What about getting your will done, your health care directive, and your power of attorney? You and your spouse are included in this plan to get your will done. That could cost you anywhere from $750 to $2,000, depending on what your will involves. As you can tell, this is something from the trivial to the traumatic. It covers everything in between. On the front page of your handout is the legal plan. First of all, I'd like to point out, here in Arizona, your law firm is Riggs Abney, one of the top firms in the country. I have to say, I absolutely love the lawyers at Riggs Abney. I visit them often. I like to hear and learn from them. You always will have an attorney to talk to when you call in, always. You can call in and talk to them about any concern. Now, you cannot use this against your current employer. Mrs. Fernandez wouldn't appreciate that. You can call and discuss anything that's a concern to you. Here's a concern that I had recently. I purchased a new car from the same dealer that I have bought cars from before. I trust this car dealer, not a problem. But I made a point to them because they kind of poo-pooed me when I talked about these legal plans. So right before I signed on the dotted line, I said, no, I want to send this to my attorney firm. So I asked for a copy, which today they gave me on a zip drive. So I sent the zip drive to my attorney. He reviewed everything, found a couple of minor issues, more grammatical errors than anything, but he did find a place on there where it saved me several $100s. So I took it back to my attorney, to my car dealer, took it back to my car dealer, gave it to them and said, change a couple of things and I'll sign. So I did. Everything worked out just great there. Here's another time that was something that was an issue to me. I taught school a long time ago, and when I taught school, I had a legal plan. Well, when I left school, I didn't pay attention, and neither did any of my other teacher friends, that we didn't have that legal plan that went with me. Well, a few years back, I had an issue, and I really wanted to hire an attorney firm, but I could not afford it. This was obviously before I had LegalShield. Well, what did I do? I caved. I let the other person get their way, and it was over. One thing I know with this plan is that it moves with you. It was not like the one I had when I taught school. If I had had that plan all those years, I would have never run into the issue that I had. This plan moves with you. If you choose to leave this business, which Mrs. Fernandez is probably not happy about, but if you choose to leave this business, it will move with you. And that's an important thing to understand. Now I'm going to shift to the other side of the sheet with the identity theft protection. Unfortunately, because most of us have been a victim or know somebody a victim, identity theft is huge today, correct? How many of you in the room have known someone or is an issue or has had an issue? Absolutely. This is a serious issue. ID Shield is the most comprehensive product out there. That is why Mrs. Fernandez chose us. We monitor more of what matters. We're not only credit monitoring, by the way, this is 3 bureau credit monitoring. What I always say to people is this starts from birth and wraps around your entire life. It's a 360 plan. Goes from birth through our social media. We all have social media today, correct? Many of you have Netflix on your phone. Netflix connects to your email. Your email connects to your checking account because my checking account also pays for my Netflix. When I say wraps around you, social media, your credit cards, your bank, medical ID, which is the #1 fraud in America today. If you do fall victim, you get a licensed private investigator that is working on your behalf to restore your identity back to where it was. There's no cost cap, and they work on it for as long as it takes. This is what I always say to people. Do you lock your house when you leave? Do you lock your car? Then why would you not lock your life? Flip to the next page. As I mentioned earlier, if you need to speak to your significant other, at the top of the page on the right-hand side, write hold. Now let's proceed. Today's date is September 23rd, 2019. Put the last 4 of your social security number, fill in your birth date, the year you were born, not today's date, and continue on down. On the right-hand side of the page, it has a place for 3 dependents. If you have more than 3 dependents, flip the page over and write them information on the back. Thank you. I'll be collecting your forms as you leave. I'm excited to be your LegalShield rep. I will also be here to answer any questions when it's over. Thank you.
All right, Miss Tracy Wright Owen, ladies and gentlemen. And how do you feel about that, Tracy? How do you
Well,
feel about
I jumbled all the way through it because I was laughing because you sent me a text and said, "Can you bring me a glass of ice?"
That's funny. I meant to send that to my wife. My bad.
Yeah, no. And that just totally threw me
Well,
off track.
that distracted you unnecessarily. My apologies. That is.
It was pretty funny. I'm sorry.
I was wondering why she didn't answer me. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Sorry. And just so you know, I do not need you to bring me a cup of ice. I think I'll be okay.
Okay. It'll melt between here and there. I guarantee it.
Exactly. I'm so sorry for that. I just texted the wrong person. So, well, I'm glad I didn't tell you how much I love you and thought you were gorgeous and stuff. That could have gone worse.
Then I would have been rolling on the floor laughing.
That would have really distracted you. So, well, and I would like to say that I did that on purpose. just to show that you never know what you're going to get in an enrollment, but that's not true. I didn't do that on purpose. So anyway, but that doesn't mean that it's not true that sometimes you'll get a curveball thrown at an enrollment as well. So, well, let's break down your presentation here. I've got about a page of notes. Let's look at timing first of all. And one reason, folks, that one of the first things that I always look at is timing, is because that's one of the most crucial things in your presentation. You could have incredible emotion, you could have great stories, you could have perfect examples, and if you're 25 minutes long, it's not going to really matter because you're going to lose everybody anyway, right? So you'll notice that when I start to critique a presentation, timing is always one of the first things that I look at. So we were well under 10 minutes on this. We started at 10:57 Central Time. You spent about 5 minutes on the introduction and the legal plan because you started into the identity theft plan at 11:02 and then started into your close at about 11:04. So all in all, it was about a 7 to 8 minute presentation, which is not bad. But you've got a little time there that you could focus on a couple of more things, and so I'll get to that here in just a minute. But you know, hey, good news is you're not overtime, which is a much more common mistake than not going long enough. So, and I would say this: I think you covered enough in that presentation. Even though you could have focused a little bit more on getting a will done, you could have focused a little bit more on speeding tickets, you covered enough to definitely warrant a $9 a week investment, you know, which is what $8.98 a week is going to round up to. So, so I think, you know, if that was the presentation that you did, I think that you would sell memberships, and I think it's fine. Having said that, you could spend a minute talking about getting a will done and the importance for the family. You could spend a minute on getting speeding tickets. I know that you mentioned those, but you could spend a little bit more time and elaborate on those, and you'd be fine on time. If you were at 14 minutes, I would not say that, right? But because you were at, you know, 7.5, 8 minutes, I think you could take more time. I like how when you got into the legal plan, I really liked how you said, you know, the average American has 1 to 2 legal issues every year. Does that mean that we're bad people? No, not at all. But I think we could all agree bad things happen to good people. I really like that line. That's one of the best ways I've ever heard that particular objection overcome. Which the objection there is, why would I need an attorney? Why would I need a legal plan? I'm not a criminal, right? And people are thinking that when they come in and you say, we're going to talk about legal. They're thinking, I'll tell you who needs that is my cousin, but not me. And I love how you broke that down. It was very straightforward, very simple. I thought it was really good. I want to pick out just a couple of quick things here on the pricing. The pricing that you used was $8.98. I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on pricing. That is the standard group pricing. $8.98 a week is $38.90 a month. That is the standard group pricing for the legal and identity theft. Now, later on, you mentioned 3-bureau monitoring. That would be more, so we want to make sure that we're in line there. Doris sent me those numbers last week after our call, because I had said that it was a blanket $5 more for 3-bureau monitoring, and that's not true on a family plan. A family plan, that $38.90 goes to $46.90, so it would be $8 more a month for a family plan. I'm just looking here, and I'll tell you what, if they get just LegalShield, it's $27.95 instead of $18.95, so that's $9 more for a family to do 3-bureau monitoring on just LegalShield. So those numbers are in the back. Those are on lsengage.com. You can download that pricing. If you just search for pricing, I think that should come up, and it should show you the three bureau pricing. Personally, I don't offer a lot of three bureau myself, so that's why I'm not as familiar with that. But we do want to make sure, number one, that whatever pricing that we say is the pricing for that group, but number two, that it's in line with the coverage that we're offering. So, and that is something. Those are easy mistakes to make, but
we need
can't
to,
make, right? We got to make sure that we're
right.
in line with that stuff. So, and I'm not talking to you, Trey. I'm talking to everybody on that, because those are again, especially when we've had so many pricing updates and changes in the last few years, that can be tough sometimes to make sure that we're on track. So it's always a good idea to kind of double check our numbers, make sure that we're translating weekly numbers correctly. Just do a double check before we go back into the group. Let me look here. I really liked your story about the contract at the car dealership, and I would maybe suggest that we change a couple of things in there. It sounds like you had gone in there and talked to them about offering LegalShield as an employee benefit, and they were not real big on that. Did I understand that correctly in your story?
Yes, they absolutely were. We're not big on it.
Yeah. And I mean, the phrase you used was they poo-pooed on you when you talked to them about it.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I don't know where that came from. I never say that word.
That's okay. It wasn't a bad phrase. But I don't know that that's crucial to the story, right? Because that almost shows that you were, here's how I would understand that, is that you were using the plan kind of in a vindictive way. And that's not what you're wanting to communicate. And so
right.
I would probably just leave that out about having approached them.
Okay.
I do like the fact that you had bought several vehicles there before. The way I might say that is, now I had purchased vehicles there before, but this was the first time that I purchased a vehicle as a LegalShield member, and I wanted to try it out. And so before I signed the documentation, I said, I'm going to have my attorney review this. And at first, I don't know that they really believed me. I don't know if that's accurate. You want to make sure that it's accurate, but that sometimes is the case where they don't really believe you. And I said, no, I really want to send this to my law firm first, which I did. And guess what? They were able to point out just some minor changes that were able to save me. And that's where we really want to get it. If you're going to share that story, I would get a dollar amount there. So if that's $100, if it's $500, whatever, but what did those changes save you?
Okay.
If you could find that number and have an exact number there, the reason is that's going to connect with those logical decision makers, right? They're hearing, okay, this is going to cost $9 a week, call that, $40 a month or $35 a month, whatever it is, but $9 a week. But if it saved you $300, for example, or even $100, then what the logical person is sitting there thinking is, okay, well, that one thing paid for her membership for X number of months. So anytime that we can get exact on the dollars, it's not always possible, but I would highly recommend that in that story. Other than that, I thought it was a great story. You edited out a lot of details there that you could have shared, and I could tell that you had been intentional about, I just want to share the meat of the story. And then your second story was good too. I was wondering where you were going with, you had a legal plan before as a teacher, and then you weren't able to take that with you. I was wondering where that was going to come back into the story, but then you did tie it back in, and you tied that into, this plan is portable, which I thought was good. I thought that was really good, and I thought that, again, if we could get a dollar figure in there, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Of that other party, I ended up losing $500 or whatever that is. That always makes the story a little bit better. But I love how you turn that into portability. One thing that I'll just mention there, whenever we're talking about portability, you can always use the example of retiring, because I think you kind of felt the awkwardness of, hey, if you leave here, and the way that you said that is, Miss Fernandez won't like that. But I always kind of lean on retiring. So the way I say that is if you ever leave the company for any reason, if you retire or whatever, and that kind of eases that awkwardness, right? Because everyone's going to
Right.
retire at some
Right.
point. But I say it in a way where they understand it's not just if you retire, but if you ever leave the company, for example, if you retire or anything like that, then this is portable and you can take it with you.
Okay, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's. But again, I love that. I thought your overview was succinct, straight to the point. Your stories were edited. I thought they were great. They were relevant. I thought all of that was really really good. As you got into the identity theft, I thought that was really good. I thought you did well talking about the monitoring. I love that phrase. We monitor more what matters. Just like I liked in your legal, I liked how you said from the trivial to the traumatic. That's another kind of catchphrase that I thought was really good. Thought your explanation of the restoration was good. If anything on the identity theft, um, and you did this, but maybe a little bit more emotion from you on identity theft, the
Okay.
frustration, the nightmare, that it is for people. I want to hear a little bit more of that. Now, and I say that I know that I'm being extremely picky there because you did add some good emotion there, and you connected well with the audience. But I feel like that can be even a little bit more devastating, for people, and maybe that's just with pauses in your speech. Maybe the words don't have to change as much as just emphasizing some of those words a little bit more. And if some jerk hadn't texted you about bringing him a cup of ice, maybe that would have come out a little bit more organically. But anyway, I realized I had distracted you on that. So, but just and I think that you were probably focused on what to say, which is natural. We're all there. But the more practice that you get, the more times that you do that presentation, the more that you can really get into focusing on emphasizing certain words and really getting that emotion across. I just felt like that you could have come with a little bit more punch there, if that makes sense. So, but again, I can't really critique anything that you said because it was all good. The content was really good throughout. I did feel more emotion with the legal though than with the identity theft, and I guess that's what I'm saying is if we could have a little bit more emotion on that second part, I think would be good. I think your close was good. Obviously, you were prepared for that. Just like with Mike and with Doris last week, it is really, really difficult to simulate a close on a webinar. If we were in person, if all of us were sitting at a board table, that would be a little bit different and we'd be able to do that a little bit more. Even then, it's not easy to replicate the actual environment of a close, right? I mean, that's kind of a very unique thing that you just kind of have to find yourself in. The more you can slow that down and the more that you can be intentional on that, the better. That's not a critique of the way that you went through it, because again, it's incredibly difficult to try to replicate that on a call. I mean, to simulate that on a call is almost impossible. But in real life, in a real group of employees, the more that we can slow that down and be intentional, whether that means walking people through, whether that means picking up your paper application to show them where to write certain things, the more that we can, again, get them writing on that paper form before they're actually writing the committal information, their name, last four of their social, all that, the more that we can just get them writing information. So the number to the law firm or the name of their location, if it's a group with multiple locations, all at the top of the app, scratching out a $10 fee, whatever that might be, the more that we can just get pen on paper where it's not committal first, and then smoothly transitioning into name, email, address, last four of the social, et cetera, the better. And let me just point out there, that when you're doing that in a group, you really just need to go with the flow of the application. And if that means that the date is at the top and then the time of day, and then it goes right to their social, because someone in Ada, Oklahoma thought that it would be a good idea to put the most sensitive thing up top, right under the date and time of day. You got to go in that flow. You can't skip it because it just looks bad. Now, if you're filling it out one-on-one, if it's just you and the prospect and you're filling out the paperwork, you can take it in whatever order you want. And in those cases, if I'm one-on-one, then I would get the social kind of at the end. I'd go with some of that more informational stuff first. But you cannot skip it in a group. You just can't, because it looks bad. I had a guy that tried that one time because he was taking my training on individual presentations and he was trying to apply that to a group, and it was bad. Because he said, now skip your social and go down, and then he was like, later, he's like, okay, now go back up to your social, and people were like, well, why did we skip it? It looked funky. And so anyway, so I'm not saying that in any, I'm not talking about Tracy's presentation there. I'm talking about in general when we're in these situations. Go through it, be intentional about it, go with the flow of the membership. And you know, you've heard Dave Paperno talk about this. You've maybe heard me talk about this. One reason that some people like to mess up the date, to give the wrong date, is because that can take that somewhat, it has the potential to kind of be an awkward moment, and it just loosens the crowd. It breaks it up a little bit. So if you were to say, for example, everyone write today's date, which is 09/15/2019, and someone in the group is going to say, today's the 16th. And you say, oh, excuse me. Okay, 09/16. I'm sorry about that. Dave Paperno's line is, that's the first mistake I've made all year, you know, and people kind of chuckle at it. I like to say, you know, I was going to give you an extra day of coverage, but this guy messed it up for you, you know, but I can say that in a soft way where it's not offensive. So you got to be kind of careful with that. But if you can make that into kind of a lighter moment, it can kind of break up that awkward moment. What has the potential to be an awkward moment, if that makes sense. But anyway, going back to Tracy's presentation, I thought that your language there was great. I mean, really, your language throughout was great. I could tell it's something that you've really worked on. And I would say a very good presentation. I mean, really, it was something that, even though you could have gotten into a little bit more detail on parts, what you said there was enough to justify $8.98 a week. No question about it. And you will sign up member. If you don't change that at all, if you take zero of my critique and apply it, then you'll still sell memberships, which is a fantastic thing. And that's not always the case, because I've critiqued presentations where it's like, if you say what you just said, no one will buy. And that's certainly far from the case with your presentation, Tracy. I thought it was really, really great. I thought you did a great job. Thank you very much again for willing to share.
Well, thank you.
Any closing thoughts from you on that?
From me?
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
Yes, you know, I scaled some of this down with doing it here. So I'm glad that you brought up those things and said to go ahead and put them in because of my timing. I was worried about my timing. So I scaled some of the details out about the stories and the stories that I usually put in there. So I'm glad that you said, I appreciate all of your comments. I will go back and revamp it.
Yeah, that's how we do it, right? That's how we roll. Is we consistently, you know, work and tweak and try to get better. And then, like I said this a couple weeks ago, when you get to the point where you're writing 50 to 70%, then you don't tweak. Then you stop changing, you know, and then you're real protective of taking anything out or putting anything in. But I think that was great, and I could tell that you were conscious about the time. You know, which is fine. And frankly, if you were in an environment where Ms. Fernandez had said, you've got 10 minutes, then I would say don't change anything. Just leave it exactly as it was. because you were at 7.5, 8 minutes, and then that would have given you 2 minutes to close, which you really need. You need a couple minutes to be able to close people and get them writing. So,
but I definitely need to add that emotion back in. So it's easier to add emotion when you're staring at people. I will tell you that.
Yeah, I'm telling you. That's the only drawback from doing this on webinar is that it's hard to simulate some of those types of real life scenarios for sure.
But I need to do it. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
If I had a cup of ice, it would be easier. But since I don't,
yeah, absolutely, it would have been easier.
Thank you again, Tracy, for sharing, and sorry again for texting you instead of my wife.
No worries. No worries. You broke the ice in the presentation. Let's just
boom, boom. There you go. I love it. Okay, I'm going to mute your line just so we don't have background noise, and then I'm going to continue on with our training here this morning. So on week 7, our final week, I really wanted to dive into what I hope is a goal for most, if not all of you. And that is to earn a 6-figure income in this business. Now, I say most, if not all of you, because not everybody has that goal. I know when Brian Fahili started, for example, Brian had been a laborer. A good year for Brian was probably $30,000 a year. And I'm speaking off of memory there. He might correct me, and it might be a little bit lower, it might be a little bit higher. But the idea for Brian to come in and make $75,000 in a year, being able to work from home and do something that he enjoyed and not be out every day breaking his back, probably was a dream come true, for him. So, and he may have had years where he made more money. I don't know his exact background, but I just know that he shared that with me one time, that, what he was doing and the results that he was getting, making 75, 80, 85,000 a year, were fantastic for him. And for some people, that's absolutely the case. For many people in our country, that would absolutely be the case. But I do go back to, and let me say the opposite of that is true as well. There are some people, the reason I say 6-figure income and not $100,000 a year, there are some people that would come into our business and looking at $100,000 a year would not be sufficient for them. They would say, no, I need to make more than that. I need to be at 200 or 300 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. 6-figure income is kind of a safer way to say that, because you could make up to $999,999 and still be making 6 figures. So, and we've got people that make 7 figures if that's where your vision is. There's nothing wrong with that as well. But the reality is, whether it's 100 or 150 or 250 or whatever it is, I hope that you've got a goal that is sizable. And I hope that our training has served to stretch your mind a little bit. Certainly that's one of my goals in presenting this information to you today, is to get you thinking a little bit bigger. To get you thinking about, hey, what you've made in the past, are you worth more than that? Are you someone that is deserving of a 6-figure income? I really liked Chris Evans' comment on that this morning. When you think as a business owner, when you look at your activity, and he said, if you owned a company and had yourself as an employee, how long would you continue to pay a 6-figure income to yourself as an employee? If you were the business owner and you had yourself as an employee and said, okay, I'm going to pay you a base salary of $100,000 a year, how far down the road would you get before you either said, this person's not worth $100,000, they're not doing enough to earn that, or I better pay this person more because they're excelling, they're above and beyond what I would expect. And that's a great way to look at our business, is as a business owner. But I certainly hope with the opportunity where it is today, with identity theft at an all-time high, with data breaches happening left and right, with America being more litigious today than it ever has been in the almost 250-year history of our country, with the need for legal services being as high today as it ever has been, and with products that meet that demand or that need better than they ever have. I mean, the product when I started 17 years ago was a good product. Today, it's a great product. We cover more than we did back then. It's a little bit more expensive than it was back then, but we cover more than we did that back then. It should be a little bit more expensive. And frankly, when you look at inflation, I mean, the group price of a legal plan was $15.95 back then. Today, that group price is $23.95. But inflation, I think, has grown, and I don't have any science to back this up or graphs to back this up, but I would estimate that inflation has grown more than that spread in the price has grown. And so, when you look at a family paying $23.95 a month for a legal plan versus a family 17 years ago paying $15.95, I think it's actually a better deal for them today. Regardless of that, though, we know that it's super affordable. And it's a better plan than it was back then. It just covers more. The law firms are better. They're more experienced than they were back then. And they were good back then. Don't get me wrong. Now, back in the 80s, I don't know that they were very good. But back when I started 17 years ago, the law firms did a good job. Today, they do a great job. With all of those scenarios, painting the perfect picture, my golly, I hope you're looking for a six-figure income. Not only that, but when you look at the people who are earning a six-figure income in our business, I mean, go to convention, go to Salt Lake, meet some of those people. Some of them you'll be really impressed. Some you'll be like, yeah, if they can make six figures, I can certainly do it too. And I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But they figured something out that if you're not earning a six-figure income right now, maybe you still need to figure out. What is it with these hundreds of people, I mean hundreds of them, that have earned a six-figure income in LegalShield, in this business with the same product, same opportunity, same market, same timing, same all of that? What did they figure out? That the thousands of people who have not earned a six-figure income, because let's make no mistake, there are more people that have not than that have. No question about that. So what is it that these hundreds of people who have earned a six-figure income have figured out that the rest have not? And that's what I want to talk about today. That's what I want to focus on. I want to share some thoughts with you as we close out this 7-week training series that really do make all the difference in the world. The first key, as you can see here on the screen, in my opinion, always has to do with what's in our brain, what's in our mind, what's between our ears. Jim Rohn calls that your philosophy. And there is no doubt in my mind that philosophy or mindset, you can call it different things, but the way that you think, the way that we think, is the number one reason why people find success. And it is absolutely the number one thing that impedes success in this business. And I wish it was different. I wish it was something else. I wish it was something that was measurable. Because we go back to, remember, I think that was week 4, that we talked about things that you can measure and things that you cannot. And philosophy was on the list of things that you cannot. There's no philosophy score. There's no mindset score. There's no mindset number. Oh, look at Tracy. She's got a mindset of 97. For sure, she's going to earn a six-figure income. There's nothing like that. There's no way to measure philosophy or measure mindset. Like you can measure number of calls and, income and other results and even activity, number of decision-maker meetings that you do in a week, or number of enrollments that you do in a month, number of employees that you get in front of. Remember, those are all things that you can measure. Well, philosophy is something that you cannot measure. And I kind of wish that the most important thing was something that you could measure. Now, it's important, don't get me wrong, but the number one thing is philosophy. And the reason why I think that's difficult sometimes is because it's easy to trick ourselves into thinking or into accepting that we have a proper philosophy, when in reality, We do not. Now, I mentioned this back in week 4, but what you expect is a great reflection of your philosophy, of your personal philosophy, the way that you think. And again, if you set a goal back in week 1 to earn, let's just say $100,000. Now, some of you were give or take, some higher than that, some lower than that, but let's just say 100,000 because that was the first example that I showed you, if you'll remember back on week 1. And if that was your income goal, and let's fast forward 12 months from now, as you get into September 2020, and let's say that we fast forward 12 months from now, and you earn 95,000, how would that make you feel? Expectation is a great reflection of philosophy or mindset. Because if you fast forward 12 months from now and you're feeling pretty good about 95,000, and again, if your goal was 200,000, I would say the same thing. What if 12 months from now you earn 195? And if you feel pretty good about that, then I'm sorry, you did not have the right philosophy back to today. Because if you felt pretty good about falling short of your goal, it means that it was not really a goal. You were not really expecting that. You were hoping for it. You were desiring it. You were wanting it, but you were not really expecting it. And desire and want and hope are wonderful things, but they're not a reflection of your mindset. What you expect is absolutely a reflection of your mindset. In addition to that, how do you think about how do you think about LegalShield? What do you think about it? It's easy to say, well, it's a great business. But is it a great business for you? Is this where you're ready and willing to plant your flag? Is this where you're going to make it? Is this what the business that you look at and say, okay, this is it. I'm here. I found it. I'm going to make it happen. Some of you have a resume out right now looking in case there's a better opportunity. And I'm not saying that that you can't be that you can't look at different things and have multiple streams of income even. What I am saying is the level of commitment that the people who have earned a six-figure income with this business, the level of commitment that they had in doing that far exceeds the level of commitment of most associates. Most people they do not have a committed philosophy. They think of LegalShield as a good business. Some people think of LegalShield as a great part-time opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But that's not the kind of mindset that leads to a six-figure income. So I'm not saying those people are bad, or that they ought to be out of the company. I don't believe that at all. I believe that I love that we have people that are here to make an extra $500 a month. Nothing wrong with that. But that's not the philosophy that's going to get you to a six-figure income. That's not the mindset. That's not the level of commitment that's going to get you a six-figure income. It's just not going to happen. I'm telling you. It's the kind of commitment, it's the kind of mindset that's going to earn you a few $100 here and there, period. If you want to earn a six-figure income, you better double down and commit. And again, I'm not talking about just being involved. There's a lot of people involved. I think I said this back on week 4, but the difference between being involved and being committed is like a ham and egg breakfast. The chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. I'm asking you to get committed, to get real committed real quick to your success in this business, to develop that kind of mindset that's do or die, man. We're going to make this happen. There is no alternative. There is nothing else out there. This is it, and I'm going to make it happen. That's the level of commitment. That's the philosophy. That's the mindset that leads to a six-figure income. And then it won't matter what happens. It won't matter when an enrollment cancels on you. It won't matter when someone on your team that you think is going to be successful decides to quit instead of deciding to be successful. It won't matter. It won't matter when the decision maker meeting that you have scheduled for tomorrow reschedules, or any number of other things that could happen that could be distractions or that could take you off course, or none of that will matter if you have the right mindset, if you have the philosophy. If the mindset is in the right place, the rest of that stuff, it's just wind. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about Jim Rohn's example here, analogy of being in a sailboat. He says we're all in our own little sailboat in the waters of life. And most people think that it's the wind that determines where you go. But the same wind blows on us all. It's never the wind that determines where you go. It's always the set of your sail. The same wind blows on us all. The same stuff that's happening to you in this business has happened to other people. One of my favorite calls, speaking of Chris Evans, who spoke this morning, one of my favorite calls ever was a call that he's done actually a couple times, where he had people like Mark Riches and Scott Brooks and myself and others get on and share the not success stories. He had us share about our worst enrollments, our worst decision maker meetings, our worst experiences. And, it was not a very motivational call of the first half, because it was just a bunch of non-success stories. It was like, bleh. But where he went with that is he said, okay, now when you have those situations, when you have an enrollment that cancels, or when you have an enrollment that you spend $200 for pizza on and nobody signs up, when you have a decision maker that laughs you out of their office or ridicules you or whatever, when this kind of stuff happens, remember, it happened to them too. And yet they turned it around. They made a six-figure income. They might have, some of them, sometimes we even use those negative experiences to fuel us into more behavior, or into more activity rather. Sometimes we don't. We just have to look past them. We just have to get over them and not let them weigh us down. Whatever it is, whatever the response, what the top producers do is they don't let that wind blow them off course. They just set their sail a little bit differently. It's not what happens to you in life. It's what you do about what happens. It's your response, your reaction to the 75 phone calls and 0 appointments. It's your reaction to that. It's your reaction to the decision maker that is all about this when you're in front of them and then joins the witness protection program and you can't find them no matter how hard you try. It's your reaction to the enrollment that goes okay, but it's not 50%. It's your reaction to that wind. It's the set of your sail that's going to determine where you go. And that I could speak for hours on this because it's so true, and it's the number one thing in our business. It's the number one thing. Now, the good news is philosophy is not something that you're just born with. Mindset is not something that you're just born with. You either have it or you don't. It's like any skill. It's something that can be developed. So let me share some thoughts with you on this before we go into our second key. Well, let's go back here. Why is philosophy so important? Because philosophy affects your attitude, attitude affects your actions, and actions affect results. So your mindset determines how you feel about something. If you have the right mindset, if the set of your sail is the right way, you still will have negative experiences. That was Chris's point on that training. But you won't feel totally defeated. You'll understand that's just part of the business. And yeah, it's not a fun part, but you're going to get, you fell over and now you need to get back up on your bike and keep riding. And it's the same thing. So your attitude won't be totally depleted. It won't be totally in the hole. That doesn't mean that rejection is ever going to feel good. I mean, it doesn't for me. I don't like rejection, but it doesn't totally drown me. And so my attitude is better. Does your attitude affect your action? Oh, absolutely. Every one of us has had one of those days where we're feeling down and we say, man, I know I need to make calls today, but I am just feeling rotten. Well, we've had those days. You got to fix that. You got to turn your mindset around. Sometimes the best thing to do in those situations is realize, you know what, it could be worse. Turn on the news for 10 minutes. I don't like to watch the news for any longer than 10 minutes because there it can start messing with your mind, in my opinion. But turn on the news for 10 minutes. I guarantee you'll see an example of somebody who has it worse. I mean, that's just, that's the world we live in. There's always somebody that's dealing with something worse than what you're dealing with. And some of you deal with some serious stuff, don't get me wrong. But there's always somebody that's got it worse. Well, maybe that needs to be the mindset. So then our attitude can improve a little bit. When our attitude improves, it's easier to take action, to get into activity mode. And of course, we know that action affects result. Here are 4 things that determine our philosophy. And this was straight from Frank Acoin, something that he taught early on in my business that totally changed the way that I view mindset. He said the 4 things that will determine your philosophy. Number 1, the things that you see. So what are you looking at? What are you putting in front of your eyes? And I mentioned that with the news. I know some people are religious about watching the news and they want to stay informed, and I get that. There's a reason though why I don't watch very much news. They say CNN, constant negative news, is what that stands for. It is a lot of negative stuff. And if that's what you're filling your brain with, it's going to be hard. Now, there's one thing in watching the news for 10 minutes just to realize you've got it. There are people that have it worse and that you're actually doing okay. There's another thing, filling your mind with that nonstop every day. That will that have an effect? I think so. Yeah, I think it does. Any kind of negativity that you fill your mind with is going to have an effect. What are the things that you're seeing? What are the things that you're listening to? Instead of putting a bunch of negative in your mind, can we start to put some positive things in? Sit down and read 10 pages of a good book or listen to 30 minutes of a really good audio. I mean, just Google John Maxwell, Anthony Robbins, Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N, Zig Ziglar. It's hard to listen to those. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's difficult to listen to somebody like that for 30 minutes and not feel a little bit better. And I want you to understand the reason is that's shaping your mindset. It's shaping your philosophy. Develop the philosophy of a business owner versus an employee. Listen to Robert Kiyosaki for 30 minutes. He'll get you thinking like a business owner. Many others as well. I like Stephen R. Covey. He gets you thinking a little bit differently. Well, when we intentionally put things like that, I mean, we talk a lot about personal development, but I know we talk a lot about it, but I want you to understand that's the purpose of personal development. It's changing the way that we think, not overnight, but over time. And it's changing the things that we see, and it's changing the things that we hear, therefore changing our philosophy. Right there with the books we read as well. And then this final point, the people that we spend time with. That is the law of association, folks. You tend to be like and think like and act like the people that you associate with. You've probably heard that before. I went to a training where someone actually did that. He said, hey, take out a piece of paper, write down the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and then write down their annual income, find the average, add those together and divide by 5, and that probably looks like your annual income. Well, you make about the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, is the point there. But it's so much more than just earning. It's the way that you think, it's the way that you talk, it's the way that you act. If you're hanging around people that swear every other word, It's not impossible, but it's difficult not to develop that habit yourself. And the next thing you know, you're in front of a decision maker. You say something that you probably shouldn't have said, and now that has a negative impact on whether you get the group or not. All those little things. If we've learned anything in this advanced training, it's that the little things matter. When you're hanging around people that every 5 seconds the sky is falling, and it's like negative Nelly, just nothing but negative, I'm going to tell you, it's not impossible, but it's difficult to keep a positive attitude when that's the environment that you're in. Not impossible, but very difficult. So, 2 things. Number 1, sometimes we need to be able to identify people in our lives that we would do well to spend a little less time around. Now, I want to be very careful here, because sometimes that person is someone that we do need to spend time around, i.e. a spouse or significant other, maybe a child. I am not telling anybody to go file for divorce, nor am I telling anybody to close off your kids out of your life because they're negative. They get you thinking negative, okay? That goes to, kind of step number 1 on this is, if you can't change the people around you, change the people around you. There are exceptions to that, and I want to be real careful there. But step number 2, and this is something that we can all control, is who are we putting in our lives that are going to have a positive impact? When you get on the call this morning and you get to listen to somebody like Jim Tanner or Chris Evans, making 150, 200 grand a year, or someone like Mark Riches making 700 grand a year, you're spending time with people that think a little bit differently than you. And boy, if that wasn't obvious from Chris Evans' training this morning, I don't know what was. I loved how he talked about this very thing, developing some of these mindsets. We'll spend more time with people like that. And again, I already mentioned the Robert Kiyosaki's, the John Maxwell's, the Jim Rohns, the Zig Ziglars, the Anthony Robbins. There's so many out there. The Malcolm Gladwell's even will get you thinking a little bit differently. Weldon Long, Power of Consistency. There's so much good stuff out there that we have more access to today than ever before, that even if you've got someone in your life that's negative, that you love and that you care about and that you don't need to distance yourself from, you can surely balance some of that out by listening to some more positive stuff. And that's kind of step number 2, put positive people in your life. It's one of the main reasons why being in Salt Lake City 2 weeks from now is so crucial. Being at that event 2 weeks from now is so important. It's just necessary. It's one of the greatest opportunities to be around the right kind of people, period, in this business. Period. That's it. We get 2 a year. One was in Dallas in the spring, and this is the Salt Lake one. Don't miss that. Don't miss that opportunity. It's powerful. That's one reason that it will set you 6 months ahead in your business. You're going to learn some things there. You're going to hear some things there that you can take back and apply. You're going to grow and you're going to develop. It's not just about the people, but the people are a big part of it. When you put yourself in that kind of an environment, you'll be amazed at the results that it has in your life. Okay. Second key here is focus. 6-figure earners in this business are able to focus. Now, don't you love that little picture? It's not one of my kids, although it is a cute child here, of zeroing in and focus. Why is focus so important? It's hard to focus on too many things and get anything done. If you chase too many rabbits, you lose them all. Really, if you chase 2 rabbits, you lose them both. You got to be real careful. Everyone needs a primary focus in this business. To earn a 6-figure income in this business, what should be our constant focus? Think about that for a second. What should be your number 1 constant focus in this business? What do you think that answer would be? I'm going to share with you my thoughts. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer on this, but I will share with you my thoughts of what that answer should be to earn a six-figure income. To me, the most important thing that you can focus on is being an executive director every month. It is the number one way to maximize this compensation plan. And frankly, I haven't run the numbers since we moved to premium. I guess it is possible to executive director qualify every month and not be a six-figure earner. Mathematically, it is possible. If you were doing that on your team and your override level wasn't very high, I mean, it is possible. Now, you'd still make good money, quote unquote. I know that's a relative term, but it is possible to be an executive director every month and not earn a six-figure income. But it's not easy to do that. I mean, the vast majority of the time, if you're executive director qualifying every month, you're going to be a six-figure earner. The vast, vast, vast majority of the time. Changing to premium is what made that a reality. Because, and also, frankly, having higher premium plans. Because back when I started, you could be an executive director. That didn't necessarily mean at all that you were going to be a six-figure earner. I mean, I was an executive director every month my first year, except for one. I remember I missed it in December because we went on that 10-day cruise and then came back and it was the holidays. I was like, oh, well, I probably shouldn't have gone on that cruise. But anyway, I missed it that 1 month, but I hit it every other month. And I mean, I made right at about $60,000. So it used to be really possible, even earlier this year when it was 50 plans, because you could go out and sell 50, $1,595 plans and not be earning six figures. But now that it's $1,400 in premium, if you're doing a significant amount of personal production, you're probably going to be an executive director. You're probably going to earn a six-figure income. The chances of being a six-figure income, being an executive director every month, are higher than the chances of not. That's just with the change in premium dollars, that's the way that it is. So how do you do that? Well, again, do you think like an executive director? Going back to that mindset, executive directors think differently. Executive directors think differently. When you think like an ED, guess what? You're going to act like an ED. And when you act like an ED and then plan like an ED, and remember we talked about planning, taking time every day to plan, but when those three things happen, when you think like an ED and act like an ED and plan like an ED, that's when you produce like an ED. Remember I shared the story with you that Stephen R. Covey shared. I don't remember if I shared that back in week 1 or not. But the story that Stephen R. Covey shared about planning, he talks about every organization needs a leader. And you need to be the leader in your organization. And he kind of compared it to a group of people that are cutting their way through a jungle. He said, you've got producers. Producers are the ones out in front. They're hacking away, man. I mean, they've got their machetes out and they're just cutting through, blazing a trail through the jungle. He said, then you've got managers. Managers are the people that are behind them. They're watching the producers. They're figuring out the logistics. When do producers need to take a break? How often do we need to sharpen the machetes? Managers are figuring all of that, trying to be more productive in that time. But the leader is the one that climbs the highest tree, looks around and says, hey, this is the wrong jungle. And you've got to be a leader in your organization. You've got to be able to climb that highest tree and look around and say, hey, am I focused on the right thing? In order to be where you want to be, you must take time to climb the tree every day. Make sure that you're taking time to plan. Make sure that you're looking at your game plan. You got to be able to do that in order to set yourself ahead in this business. And never take the emphasis off of executive director. Never, ever, ever, ever settle for anything less. If you want to earn a six-figure income, you cannot settle for performance club. You cannot settle for senior director. You need to be able to look at senior director. I skipped ahead there, sorry. You need to be able to look at senior director. If you're writing $1,000 in premium or $1,200 in premium, and you need to not be satisfied with that. Again, goes back to expectation. If you're thinking like an executive director, there is zero chance of you being satisfied with $1,200 in premium a month. It's $1,400. There's no exceptions to that. You don't call LegalShield and say, well, I did 1,200, but I worked real hard. Can you make me an ED? They'll say, well, we're proud of you, but you're a senior director at 1,200. How do you get to executive director? 1,400 in premium, nothing less. Quit accepting mediocrity and start expecting superiority. That's where you deserve to be. That's where you need to be. Let's make it happen. Think like an executive director, act like an executive director, plan like an executive director, and you will produce like an executive director. Third key here, take action. I love that picture because it gets me, it makes me think of the times where I've had to take a jump, a leap of faith in my business. And I say a leap of faith because, frankly, it was. And it was something that I was very prayerful about. These were times where I was very prayerful. And I wanted confirmation that I was working on the right thing, that maybe a direction that I was going in was the right direction. But at the end of the day, you can sit there and feel good about taking a leap all day long. Maybe you're nervous about it. Maybe you feel great about it. But if you never leap, if you never jump, you're never going to get to where you want to be. Some of you have got to do that right now in your business. It's like the buffalo example that I shared last week on the call. Remember, in Colorado, you've got the mountains, and then all of a sudden it turns into plains, and a lot of storms will come over that mountain range. I'm sharing this again. I know I just shared it last week on our conference call, but some of you might not have been on there. The storms come across the mountains. They go from west to east. And I was reading an article where the author of the article talked about the difference between cattle, cows, and buffalo. Cattle, when a storm comes, they start to run away, which is the natural reaction. When something's coming that we're not comfortable with or that we're nervous about, we tend to run away. We tend to put it off. We tend to procrastinate. And cattle run away. And in doing so, it's not like the storm never catches up to them. It does. But because they're running in the same direction as the storm, it prolongs their time in the storm. And all of a sudden, the thing that they were nervous about ends up being a bigger burden than it had to be. And this author said, typically buffalo and cattle are not in the same place, but there are some spots in Colorado where you can see them in the same place, and their response to a storm is dramatically different. Cattle turn and run away. Buffalo turn and run right into the storm. They both get hit by the storm, but the time in the storm for a buffalo is much less because they run through it. And that is such the case in our business. The more you sit back and prolong this thing, the more time that you take before you just jump, the longer you're going to be sitting there in limbo. And the more effect that this storm of life is going to have on you. Quit thinking about it and just jump. Just do it. Whatever it is, if it's making the calls today, if it's, making the commitment, if it, I don't know what it is. It's different for different people, but some of you are sitting there on the sidelines and you need to jump in the game. One thing I learned a long time ago is in order to have success, you got to have a good attitude and you got to have good activity. And this was something that my brother taught me. He said, it's like you're in a little rowboat and you got a paddle on each side. And if you only paddle with one side, what happens? If you're only paddling with your right, then you're just going to sit there and go around in circles. Same thing if you only paddle on the left, you're going to sit there and going to go the opposite way, but you're going to go around in circles. The only way that you move forward in a rowboat is if you paddle with both paddles at the same time. And he said that is much like success in this business. You've got to have a good attitude, but you also need to match that with good activity. Just having one, you're going to find yourself going around in a lot of circles. And we have people that do that. We have people that, man, their attitude is great. They've got LegalShield tattooed on their chest, man. I mean, they're all ready for that. They bleed. You poke them, they bleed purple. I mean, they're all about LegalShield. They're at all the events. They're at all the briefings. They're always happy. They're always excited. But then they go home. They don't do anything. They might make a few phone calls here and there, but their activity is terrible. And what is it? What does it look like? The results, it's like they're going around in circles. around and around and around, but they never move forward. By the same token, we have people that are the opposite too. We have people that do a lot of activity, but it's dull and their attitude sucks, or they're sitting there with very little emotion. And how does that look? They're going around in circles. I mean, they'll make a little bit of progress, but not much. Not near as much as they would make if they could get both of these down together. Having a great attitude, being positive, and then also matching that with an incredible amount of activity. That's how you have success. I love what Jim Rohn shares about the ANT philosophy. You know, when you're thinking about your prospecting today, now I'm all about having goals and measuring your results. I mean, you know, I hope that you know that. That's why we've had our reporting here the last 7 weeks. I mean, you know, I'm all about that. I think it's good. I think it's positive. I think it's professional. But at the end of the day, how many calls should you make today? How many prospecting calls should you make? How many companies should you reach out to today? Well, how much is enough? Here's how much you have to do. All you can. Do as much as you can. That's how much an ant does. You notice when an ant is gathering food, how much do they get? They gather until they can't gather anymore. That's all they don't stop. They don't have a quota. The ants don't reach a certain time of day and say, okay, well, we're done gathering food. No, they're just always doing it. They're always gathering. How much is enough? I don't know. As much as you can do. So if you make 50 because that was your goal, but then you look and you say, I got another 15 minutes here. I bet you I could make another 5 calls. I don't know what it is about that. It's hard because I tend to be kind of a scientific thinker. Not that I don't rely on faith, because I do. But as far as I like explanations for certain things, I like things when they're presented in a nice, logical format. And this has always been a tough one for me. Making extra calls is what I'm referring to, because I cannot explain it. But when your goal is 50 and you get to 50 and you make 5 more, it is amazing how often you'll pick up an extra appointment in those extra 5 or 10 calls that you make. How when you do a little bit more, it doesn't produce just a little bit more results. It produces a lot more results. And keep this in mind, and you might jot this down in your notes. We can always do a little bit more. I went to a training where Chris Evans said that. He said, everyone take your right hand and raise it as high as you can. And everybody raised their right hand. He said, okay, now raise it a little bit more. And it was amazing. And I remember I was in the back of the room, and every hand went up a little bit more. And he said, I told you to raise it as high as you can. But remember that you can always do a little bit more. So I would ask you that. What level of activity are you committed to moving forward? And never be afraid to do a little bit more. Now, my 4th and final key here today is to follow that action plan. Remember that action plan that we made back in week 1? Remember, it kind of looked like this? And each of you went and kind of made your own, whatever result that you were looking for. And then you've tweaked that throughout the last 7 weeks based on the results that you're seeing. But go back to that week 1. What was your action plan? Have you followed it? Some of you spent quite a bit of time coming up with that thing. Have you put it into practice? Has it produced the results that you're looking for? And again, if not, what are you doing to revise that? What are you doing to revise that plan regularly? An action plan is not something that you make one time and then file it away. It is something that ought to be in front of you regularly, every day, every week, every month. It goes back to that planning. And remember, I think it's on this next slide here. Remember what I said about Stephen R. Covey. In order to get where you want to be, you must take time to climb the tree. That's in planning. That's in reviewing that plan. But again, I would just ask you to think about your plan right now, finishing out the month of September. as you move into the fourth quarter, what does your plan look like for the fourth quarter? And then I don't think it's too early to start making a plan for 2020. Start focusing on 2020 and what is your plan going to be there. Now, I say that with caution because there are some that would hear that and say, oh, yeah, 2020, that sounds better. I'll start making a plan for 2020. And all of a sudden, they just put everything, all their intention and all their focus into 2020 because it's easier to put it out a little bit farther. I mean, really. Because then you can sit there and think, well, that'll work then. Well, now, what's your plan for September? Let's focus on that first. I want to be real careful. Not that we don't want to be looking forward, because we do. That's climbing that highest tree and looking around. But at the same time, let's not lose the opportunity that we have at our feet right now. And if this training were taking place at the end of September, or end of December rather, then I would put a lot more emphasis on 2020 plans. Right now, I want you focused on, it's always okay to think farther out, but I really want you focused on closing out the month of September. We got half a month here. Anything is possible in half a month. I don't know if you'll believe this or not. I don't know if your mindset is quite there yet or not, but I would invite you to get it there quickly. There is not a person on this training today, listening live or listening on the recording, there is not a person here that cannot ED qualify in September. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, but I want you to know that I believe it with all my heart. Now, I also believe that there are people who won't qualify for ED in September, but it has nothing to do with whether or not you're able. We are the 16th of the month, and any single one of you could go out and ED qualify. Even if you're at zero right now, you could go out and get $1,400 in premium this month. I fully believe that. There's not a person on this call, person on this training, that I don't believe that about. I really believe that it is possible for anyone. And I believe that there are some of you that will hear that and take it seriously. I wish all of you, but there are some of you that will take that seriously and say, you know what? He's right, and I am going to quit making excuses. I'm going to quit that stinking thinking, like John Addison says, and I am going to go make it happen. And I'm going to accept nothing less. That's thinking like an executive director. And that's where we need to be. Folks, let me just open it up and take any questions here. I'll just look here. It doesn't look like we have a whole lot of questions here. Although I didn't see this earlier, but going back to Tracy's presentation, David in Utah says that I like that she started with the price because most people are looking for that at the beginning, and I agree with that. I've done it both ways. I've said price at the beginning. I've said price at the end. I've sold memberships both ways, but in general, I like starting with it right up front. And Tracy, I'm glad that you did that. I thought that was great. I believe Doris did that last week as well, and I believe that so did Bill Stovall a couple weeks ago. Started with that, as well as Rachel, if I remember correctly. So, in closing here, folks, let me just share one final thought, and I alluded to this earlier as we've spent the last 7 weeks together here. I alluded to my faith, and I hope you don't mind if I share my faith a little bit with you. I can look at things that I've done in this business, and I've done some things right. I've done some things that I would change going back, I mean, if I'm being frank. But one thing that I do feel strongly about, especially, and I don't even want to say especially when I got started, because I believe this is every bit as true today as it was 17 and a half years ago. And that is, I really did spend a lot of time praying, and I really believe that there were doors that were open that wouldn't have otherwise been. I don't know if you believe that or not. I don't know. I don't know what everyone's belief is, and I'm really not trying to say anything negative about someone that doesn't share my belief system, and that's totally okay. But I hope you don't mind that I share with you that I do believe that that was a big part and continues to be a big part of my success. Expressing gratitude for the things that I've seen and had and been a part of, and certainly asking for help. Sometimes the best way to think bigger and to stretch our minds is to intentionally invite the influence of a higher power. And that's what I mean. It's one of the things that I mean by praying a lot. I remember a story that I heard. I think it was Joel Osteen that shared this, if I'm not mistaken, who's a preacher here in Texas, and he shared a story. Some of you have seen him on TV. Some of you may not even know that he's here in Texas. He's down in Houston. That's where his actual church is at. But they do a lot of telecast and things like that as well. I like listening to Joel Osteen. He has a simple way of kind of breaking down principles that I think are ultra important. But one of the stories that I remember from him was about a golf player that flew to Saudi Arabia because the king of Saudi Arabia had requested that this American golf pro come show him some tips and help improve his golf game. Now, he didn't fly there in economy. He didn't even fly in first class. The king of Saudi Arabia sent a private jet to the United States to pick this golf pro up, and he spent the next week playing on some of the most beautiful golf courses in the world and played alongside this king and gave him some tips and showed him how to improve his golf game. And at the end of that week, the king of Saudi Arabia thanked this golf pro, and of course the golf pro probably felt to thank him, but the king of Saudi Arabia asked if he could give him a gift for taking his time and for coming out. He wanted to give him a gift, and the golf pro did the socially correct thing. He said, "No, that's not necessary. It's been my privilege." But the king insisted. He said, "I really want to get you a gift." And so this golf pro thought about it, and he said, "Well, I have a little collection of golf clubs, and maybe you could add to my collection." The king raised his hand and said, "Say no more. Consider it done." And again, they gave each other one final salutation, and the golf pro was back on the private jet flying back to the United States. On his way back, he started to think about this and started to think about what kind of club, a golf club, a king would buy. Maybe it would have a diamond encrusted handle, or maybe it would be solid gold. Not that would be very good to play golf with; it would be pretty heavy. But he was thinking for his collection, and this might become the crowning jewel of his collection, so to speak. So he got home and he waited several weeks, and every day we'd check the mail and wait for a package to arrive. And finally, after a few weeks, a letter did come. He was expecting kind of a package that took him a little off guard, caught him a little off guard, but he got this letter in the mail, and he could tell it was from Saudi Arabia. And he opened up the letter and found inside the deed to a 500-acre golf club. And the message that Joel Osteen shared, and that I'll share with you today, is that kings think differently. Kings think differently. Now, in our business, we see that. That's been a big message of my training today. Six-figure earners think differently. Executive directors think differently. Millionaires think differently. But at the end of the day, my friends, kings think differently. And why do I spend time on my knees? Because I want the King of Kings to help me in my business, and to help me with my family, and to just help me in life in general. And I want you to know I rely on that. I don't think that it's a negative thing to look back at 17 and a half years that I've been doing this and to identify things that I've done well and things that I should have and could have improved, and certainly need to improve in the future. That's kind of self-reflection is never a negative thing. But I don't want any confusion around the idea. I don't want anybody to confuse that practice with me thinking that I somehow am responsible for any success that we have been blessed with, because I don't feel that way. And I'm grateful that the King of Kings has helped me to think differently, that he's opened up my mind, that he's opened up doors and windows of opportunities. And there have been times where a door slammed and I was discouraged, only to find that another door opened. And so again, thank you for letting me share my faith with you. To me, it's one of the greatest things about our business is that we have the ability to see this firsthand and to be a part of something that is deeper and more meaningful than counters and commissions, than premiums and policies, but something that is fundamental in my heart and I believe in our world today. So with that, folks, I want to thank you again for taking some time and plugging in these, not only today, but really throughout these 7 weeks that we've spent together. I want to invite you to continue to participate in the level of activity that hopefully you've seen increase, and to even increase that even more. I would invite that, and certainly I want to invite you to reach out to me if I can help you in any way, shape, or form. That's what I'm here for, and I certainly want to be able to do that. None of you have an excuse. All of you have my contact information, so use it. Let's connect. And I certainly can't wait to see many of you, if not all of you, in Salt Lake City in just a couple of weeks from now. Our Solutions in Action training featuring Doris Frencha, who we heard from last week, Abby Parker, Rachel Lott, and myself is going to be on Thursday, October 3rd. Let's plug into that. I'll tell you, that's going to be such a phenomenal event, not just a training, but an event, one that I hope that you walk away with actual results from. Our goal is to set over 100 decision maker meetings up that day in that training, and I really believe that we can do that. With that, I will say one final time in this training, God bless you. Thank you for plugging in, and we'll see you at the top.